Hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. It's 4 a.m. here in London, where I'm currently speaking from. And the new moon is in about 20 minutes from now. So this is the first one I've done at this sort of time. If you're in this time zone, well done for making it, but welcome wherever you're from. Now, today, Wednesday, is the eve of the feast of Christ's Ascension. So I thought I'd talk about a particular aspect of Christian symbolism, which is to do with the ascending serpent. Now, it's associated really with the risen Christ and the ascended Christ as well. And this story of Moses raising the serpent in the wilderness is the one that we're going to look at, because this is the one which Christ associates with his resurrection and ascension. Now let's look at a short quote from the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, which is where there's a description of Moses raising the serpent in the wilderness. And Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. Now, this is something that Christ uses to as a sort of a foreshadowing of his own resurrection. And so you have this idea of Christ as the ascending serpent. Now, it's in the Gospel of John that he makes this connection. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And one of the associations that you get of rebirth and resurrection with a serpent is when the serpent sheds its skin. So the serpent sheds its skin and is reborn or born anew. And so you have that as part of this serpent symbolism of Christ in his resurrection. But the place where you see this connection made very clearly between the cross itself and the ascending serpent is the readings that happen on the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, which is on September the 14th, just before the autumn equinox. Now, the first reading is that reading that I just gave a quote from the book of Numbers, Moses raising the serpent. The second reading is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, and it's about what's called Christ's kenosis, which is Christ's emptying out. It's associated with Christ's humility, or going to the very lowest point, and this then leads to Christ's exaltation to the highest point. Now, this is the direct opposite of Lucifer, the fallen angel, who attempts to raise himself to the highest point, and that hubris then results in him falling to the lowest point, which is the center of the earth, or Sheol, the deathly underworld in the Hebrew tradition. So that's the second reading. And again, it's really about this idea of descending and ascending. And then the gospel is John's gospel, the one that I just showed you a quote from. So all of these readings, these are the ones that are specifically on the exaltation of the Holy Cross. So the cross has this association with ascent, the re-ascent. Now, another place that you see this association of the cross and the ascending serpent is particularly in an Orthodox crozier. Now, you see it in the crozier in the Western Church as well, but it's particularly overt in the Orthodox tradition, as you can see with this. Now, you have, you can probably see the small cross in the middle, and then on either side, there are these two serpents with their heads coming in towards the cross. The cross is always a bit higher than the two serpents. And this is an image of Moses' staff. So Moses' staff is also one that turns into a serpent in one of the stories of Moses, but also this idea of the brazen serpents, the serpent made of brass, which Moses um, lifts up in the wilderness. Now, the other type of crozier is the shepherd's crook crozier, which obviously has this connotation of the bishop with the flock. But even with this type of crozier, I suspect that there is a serpentine symbolism to it as well, which would relate, I suppose, to the bishop themselves rather than the bishop in relation to the flock. Because obviously a shepherd's crook does have a certain serpentine appearance. Now, you see that really clearly in this very interesting crozier, which is actually in Wells Cathedral, and it belonged to Bishop Jocelyn. Bishop Jocelyn is someone about whom there is also a local dragon legend just outside the city of Wells, the Dragon of Warminster. Now, I'll probably talk about that in a future session, maybe the next one. But this particular crozier has a very interesting possibility because it has both serpent storylines in the sense of the ascending serpent, but also the descending serpent, because this is an image of St. Michael fighting Lucifer or Satan. And so that leads to that particular serpent descending into the underworld. But the whole thing is encompassed by this sort of shepherd's crook serpentine crozier. So you have both ascending and descending serpents in this particular crozier. Now, the thing I should have said about crozier actually means, well, it's the Anglo-Saxon form of the word crucifer. So it does specifically relate to a cross. And so again, you have this idea of the ascending serpent being associated with a cross. Now, interestingly, there are various different examples in different traditions of an ascending serpent, which is in some way flanked by the sun and the moon. So the sun on one side and the moon on the other. And here you see an image of Christ crucified with the sun on one side, the moon on the other. But this is something you see in other traditions as well, or in other situations. So for instance, in alchemy, Hermes and his caduceus, so he's holding a caduceus in each hand, as you see him here. Now you can see just around his legs, there's the sun on one side and the moon on the other. And his presence is bringing about, I suppose, a relationship between what is, or what can be looked upon as warring opposites. Now, this is essentially what the caduceus also symbolizes as well, the two serpents wrapped around the pole. Hermes finds two serpents engaged in battle, so he gets a stick and he separates them, but then they wrap around that pole. So the introduction of this third thing is what brings about this ideal middle path of balance between opposites. The sun and the moon are always symbolic of opposition. Harmonious opposition generally is how they're looked upon. So the sun is in daytime, the moon is in nighttime, and then the middle path between them is this one that unites the opposites. Now you have a very similar thing in the tantric tradition, what's known as Kundalini, where you have two serpents wrapped around a central column. The two serpents, one is the sun, one is the moon, and the central column, the Sushumna, is again that middle path of balance between opposites. In the Chinese tradition, there's also its own similar sort of image. This is Fuxi and Nuwa, male and female, half serpent, half human, tails wrapped around one another. One holds the compasses, one holds the set square. So you have direct geometric symbolism of opposites there as well, because the compasses is the heavenly tool, the set square is the earthly tool. And then if you see below, you see an image of the moon, and above you have an image of the sun. Now, returning to this crozier from Wells, this crozier that belonged to Bishop Jocelyn, he was around in the 1200s, and he's one of the bishops who was responsible for building the cathedral at Wells. Now, this idea of ascending and descending serpent also has a seasonal connotation. Now, Easter is directly associated with the spring equinox because it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. So it's a spring equinoctial festival. And that is, of course, associated with the ascending serpent, with Christ's resurrection. Whereas Michaelmas is associated with the autumn equinox. It really was the day in the medieval world that sort of symbolized the autumn equinox. It's a little bit after the autumn equinox. And interestingly, what I was saying before about the exaltation of the cross, that's just before the autumn equinox. So it's as if you have this return upwards just before the autumn equinox, and then just after the autumn equinox, you have the descending serpent, because that is the association of the war in heaven, which St. Michael engages in against Lucifer. That is associated with that feast of Michaelmas. So you have the ascending serpent with the ascending light of the spring equinox, and the descending serpent with the falling light of autumn. Right, let's draw. I shall just de-share my screen. I shall say hello first. Good morning, if it is morning where you are. I'll spit like that. Right, let's get the camera on. Right, as you can see, I'm using a piece of A4 paper. I always have the white paper in the background, so it changes the light setting on the camera if I do that. Right, this piece of A4 paper, as you can see, it's in portrait orientation. Now I'm going to make a mark near the bottom of the page. We want to be along the middle column. So I'm going to mark as near as I can to the halfway point between the sides of the page. I'm going to make a mark at the bottom, which I just made there, and then a similar mark at the top, because I'm going to draw a vertical line onto that middle area of the page. There, so there's my vertical line. Now we're going to ascend along this line. So we want it to be directly vertical in the middle of the page. Right, having done that, I'm now going to put a dot on that line, which will be my starting point. And this dot is going to be 1 and let's do 1.5 inches from the bottom of the page. Right, so I put a dot. I don't know if you can see that. It's 1.5 inches up from the bottom of the page, and this is where I'm going to begin my ascension from. Right, the measurement I've got on my ruler here is 3/4 of an inch. And I'm placing the point of my compasses on that dot, which is 1.5 inches up. And I'm going to draw 7 circles as we move upwards. Now, the way I'm going to get each new mark is to place the point of my compasses at the top of the circle that I've just drawn, and then make a mark on the line. Like so. And then that gives me the center of the next circle. So again, in the top of the circle, make a mark, and then use that mark to draw the following circle. So 7 circles, each one should have a diameter of 1.5 inches, but obviously the radius is what we have on the compasses, and so that's 3/4 of an inch. Now, hopefully, it's taken you very close to the top of the piece of A4 paper. And what we're actually doing here is a type of pattern that you see on some Roman mosaics. So it might be one that you recognize as we start drawing it, but it's two rather like a dual serpent wrapped around itself, rather like what you see with the caduceus and the kundalini serpentine movement. So we're going to draw that pattern using these 7 circles. Now, the next thing that we need to do is go back to the ruler and go back to that 3/4 inch measurement that we have. Now, I'm going to reduce the measurement by 2, or in fact, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to increase the measurement by 2/16. So 2 of those tiny increments on the ruler. So you should now just be a little bit below 1 inch. So like I say, 2/16 up from that measurement of 3/4 of an inch that we were just using. Now these circles should all be sort of medium or light weight. And we just go into the same 7 points where we did So as you can see, it's creating these overlaps between the circles. Now I'm going to actually put some heavy line on shortly. So that's part of why I want all these circles to not be so heavy, because we'll highlight certain of the lines. Right, I'm going back to the ruler and I'm going to sort of go the other way, as it were. So if you go back to the 3/4 of an inch measurement that we were just using at the beginning, but then this time go 2 increments smaller than that. So now you're just a bit above 1/2 inch. Sort of halfway between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch. It's 8, 9, 10/16, this one. Right, I'm now going to press heavily. This is final line that we're going to do. And these are the only parts of the pattern where we have complete circles in final heavy line. So as you can see, I'm drawing more heavily with these ones. And you should hopefully find also that these ones tangent the larger circles that we just drew a second ago. Right, to finish this off, I'm going to return to that larger measurement that we use. Now, I don't need to use a ruler because I already have the circle here that I can set my compasses with. So that outer circle, it was the second set of circles that we did. Now, because we're going to weave these circles, it means that we're going to put some of the circle in, and there'll be a bit more as well, sort of with the top and the bottom circle, because they're the ending ones. I'll draw it first and then describe it. Now with this one at the bottom, like I say, there's a bit more. The place where we don't draw is there, just that last bit. But we start at this point and go all the way around until you get to there. So we don't go over that outer circle when we reach here. Now with the second circle, it's a little bit different because now we're actually in that process of movement. Right, so with this one, and this is how it's going to be for most of the others until we reach the top. I'm beginning at that point, but then stopping at that point. And then you get an equivalent sort of opposite where you begin from this point and move up to this point. And this is what we're going to do with, well, the next 5 circles. And then the final one at the top has a similar thing to the bottom circle because it's the final one. There, so there's that one. So it's these two, you've got this descending movement like so to there, and an ascending movement to here. Now here I am at the top one, and that is going to have almost but not quite a complete circle. Now really this one at the top sort of does the opposite really to what was happening in the bottom one. Okay, everyone, I hope you've managed to do that okay. As usual, this recording will of course go onto my YouTube channel. I'm going to share my screen again just to finish off. Now, I've shown you this on the past couple of occasions, I think, but I've made a few small changes to it. The first course that I'm going to do in this sequence of courses beginning in September, in fact, beginning at Michaelmas, I've actually made that first session. I was going to do glass painting, but I've decided because it's the first one, it will just be a sacred geometry weekend in which there'll also be a labyrinth construction and labyrinth walk. So that'll be geometry of the natural world, of the cosmos, of the cathedral in Wells, and how all of those tie together with a Michaelmas theme. And there'll also be a Michaelmas event that will happen at the end of that weekend with someone called Rupert Sheldrake, who's a scientist who owns a piece of land in or just outside the city of Wales, St Michael's Wood, which is in the area of the dragon legend that is around Wales. I was mentioning earlier, Bishop Jocelyn. So more about that at the next session. I'll have more details about that. Now, this is the most upcoming course in June. This is one that's happening at Wells, run by Kairos Educational Charity, which is an educational charity that was set up by my teacher, Professor Keith Critchlow, and his daughter is the one who now runs the organisation. So do come along to that if you're free. That'll be myself, Daniel Doherty, and Adam Tetlow, who are going to talk about the sacred tetractys, which is that triangle you can see on the top left there of 10 dots, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And you have various windows of this shape in the cathedral at Wells. Now, I'm also going to be constructing a labyrinth at St Dominic's Priory in London, the Rosary Shrine, on the 18th of May. It's a Saturday. So do come along to that. That'll be just after lunch. I think I'm going to be doing that, but I'll be building it, I suppose, before, and then it'll be after lunch that we'll walk it. So that event is called Wisdom and Healing. I'll send an email about that shortly. Now, as you can see, the next session is at a slightly more reasonable time for the time zone that I'm in, 2:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, May the 23rd. So do feel free to join me then. So thank you for coming to this one this morning or late in the evening, wherever you are. And I shall see you again, hopefully, at the next one. Thank you for coming. Goodbye. See you next time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Bless you.